In this video, I'm going to be doing like a world history, racial profile, migration lesson. And I'm going to be talking about female authoritative bloodlines. And I'm also going to be going over race again, the racial profiles of Israelites and Jesus and so on. This is obviously coming off the heels of this video right here. And I'm going to be going over cognitive dissonance again. Cognitive dissonance, I talked about that in this video, is when you are approached with new and conflicting information, you either accept it or it's like a fight or flight thing. You either accept it or you fight against it or you just ignore it. Okay, the Bible does not teach that the Jews were one race. I do not see that. Okay, they were not all just Semitic. And it just tells you in plain English in the book of Revelation that God's people were mixed. Okay, and I know that, this is just about the future. No, it's not just about the future. This is actually, you're gonna come to the revelation that it's always been like this. Okay, God's people were bilingual and they were multiracial. And I'm also going to be dropping a very huge, hard to swallow bombshell about Jezebel later in the video, at the end of the video. So I know that God knows, and most people are, I was too, okay, they were under the assumption that they were just Semitic people in the Old Testament that were God's people. They're all Semitic for thousands of years, 4,000 years, people were just Semitic. And then in the New Testament, that's when God allowed other people to come in, right? Jews and the Gentiles. I actually don't think that now, because the Bible doesn't teach that they were all just Semitic. That's genetically, historically, and biblically inaccurate. All right, I will show that to you right now. So God's not stupid. He's he knows that most people are going to assume that these guys were Semitic. Okay, and that's fine. I actually don't care. If you really think that the Jews of the Bible were just all Semitic, and you've accepted Christ, and you know that God is here to save everyone, I actually don't really care. Okay, because God, if you accept, but that just proves that you have to believe in the Jesus story, the Jesus part, New Testament. You have to believe in the New Testament, because why on earth would God just be interested in saving one race? Okay, that would make God racist. What's the definition of racism? Racism isn't just you hating other races. It's about you. The exact definition of racism is you believing that one race is superior to any other race. Okay, Semitic people are not superior to anyone. Okay, white people are not superior to anyone. The Semitic people are not superior to any race. All right, that is not that would make God racist. All right. First of all, you can genetically tie everyone in the world to the Middle East. Okay, so you saying that Jesus is had Middle Eastern heritage, he was Middle Eastern, isn't saying anything. You're just saying he comes from everywhere, which is exactly true. Okay, you can tie everyone on Earth to the Noah's Ark landing area and to Mesopotamia. All right, because Noah's Ark just landed right above there, so it would make sense that everyone genetically is tying to that area. And something I really wanted to point out, human genetics and the information of the Bible is exactly the same. Okay, if God says humans come from the same area, or if Christians say humans come from the same area, that's stupid and moronic. But if a scientist says it gives you the exact same information, that's genius. Please realize that this information is basically the same. Alright? This is the exact same information. God told you this a long time ago. Okay, so people who study genetics, scientists and scholars, and people who study ancient genetics, and people who study ancient languages, it is like trying to untangle Christmas lights, okay? Because these people are so mixed then and now, it is almost nearly impossible to exactly say where anything comes from anywhere. It is very hard, okay? And the problem with that is because people believe in evolution, and they're still trying to link these people to monkeys, and so they're getting lost in that. And they're not just getting the information from the Bible. The Bible will just tell you exactly what happened. But anyway, these people became mixed, okay? Everyone is mixed. So in the ancient world, okay, historians don't separate people by race. They separate people by what language they were speaking first. That's how historians separate people groups. There was the Sumerians and the Amorites and the Egyptians. Okay, so I'm trying to talk about the first known civilizations on Earth. Okay, what are the difference between the Amorites and the Sumerians? No one knows. Okay, no one knows what the difference between the Amorites and the Sumerians and the Hittites. Okay, they bring up, then the Hittites are thrown in there. They're separated not by race, because it's almost impossible to do so. They are separated by language groups. Okay, so it is my opinion that Abraham was technically considered an Amorite, because the Bible says he was an Amorite. Okay, he is labeled as an Amorite because the Amoritic people were the first people group to speak a Semitic-like language. Okay, it wasn't Hebrew yet. According to basic history, Hebrew had not been invented yet. Okay, the Amorites were speaking a Semitic-like language, and in the Bible, I will give you the Bible passages where it says that. Okay, this is God talking to Jews about Jerusalem, and say, "Thus said the Lord unto Jerusalem, thy birth and thy nativity is of the land of Canaan. Thy father was an Amorite, and thy mother a Hittite." So this is later in the book of Ezekiel. "Husbands and their children, your mother a Hittite, and your father an Amorite." Okay, so I'm going to bring up Sarah being a Hittite. I'm going to show you more evidence in the Bible where it tells you Sarah was a Hittite. Who were the Hittites? They are labeled as Indo-European mostly because of what language they were speaking. They were not speaking a Semitic language, and they were not labeled as Semitic. Okay, they are labeled as Indo-European, and there's an argument if Indo-European for them meant they were light-skinned or dark-skinned. Okay, because no one knows, or mixed. They were probably mixed. Okay, no one knows because there is no genetic evidence for the Hittites. All we know for them is that they had big foreheads and they spoke an Indo-European language. That's it. And an even further argument that Sarah was probably a Hittite is that if she wasn't a Hittite, then why did Abraham take her body to a Hittite man and bury her on Hittite burial lands? Okay, because she wasn't a Hittite, because she was a Hittite. Okay, that's why he took her to a Hittite burial plot. All right, and I'm gonna go back to this map real fast. There are two theories of where Abraham comes from. He either comes from where Babylon is. So if you're gonna label people by where they're from, you have to label Abraham as a Babylonian. Oh no! Okay, and if you're gonna use this map, so Abraham was supposed to be a descendant from Shem, right? Then if you're gonna do that, you're gonna have to label Abraham as a Babylonian, right? And then you're gonna have to say the Babylonians and the Assyrians were descendants from Shem, right? And then you're gonna have to say that they were Semitic then, if you're gonna start doing it like that. And then there we go with the Christmas lights again. Okay, so either the Babylonians and the Assyrians were Jewish, Semitic Jewish, according to this, or you're gonna have to admit that they were mixed before they started separating. All right, again with those Christmas lights, trying to separate these people by our current understanding of what race is almost impossible. So what does ancient DNA say about the Assyrians and the Babylonians? Okay, they do have some DNA evidence for the Assyrians and Babylonians, but it's hilarious because it just says they're related to everyone from around that area. They are a mixed race. They were very, very, very mixed. Okay, because these guys, in my opinion, these people who came off of Noah's Ark were more mixed than we are now. Okay, but anyway, it doesn't matter because a descendant from Shem mixed in with a descendant from Japheth. Okay, we're gonna start bringing up those Christmas lights again. Another problem is when people test DNA, you can also do isotopic tests on the bones. When you test someone's bones, you can tell where they were from, but it doesn't necessarily say what ethnicity they are all the time. Okay, for example, if you get a light-skinned family and move them to Africa, okay, and they start having children, and you test the bones of those children, if they've, at least until they're 5 years old, if they are born in Africa, and you test the bones of those children, they're going to test part African. Their bones will say they are part African, even though they are not African ethnically. They are African. Their isotopic bones will say that they are part African. Yes, very, very confusing, right? But another possibility is there are two locations for Ur. There's one that's really high north, which is exactly where Noah's Ark landed. So either Abraham came from Babylon, or he came right off of Noah's Ark. Okay? Okay, in that White House video, I already mentioned this, but I'm going to bring it up again. So when Abraham left Ur, either or. So when Abraham left Ur, he was picking up followers from all these tribes, okay? He picked up followers from all these tribes. Just like this Bible passage says, Abraham's followers came from every tribe, okay? And I'll show you the Bible passage again, where it tells, this was before Abraham and Sarah even had children, that he was picking up people from all over the place. And when Abraham heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them to Dan. So if Abraham had born into his house, these were his sons, even though he didn't literally have children yet. And where did he get them? He got them from all these places, all these tribes. And then the Egyptians were definitely mixed in there. Okay, I already talked about that in the White House video. When Moses left Egypt, it says that they left in a mixed multitude. And that word mixed multitude in Hebrew means people who were not originally Israelites became Israelites, aka the Egyptians. Alright? Okay? And if that doesn't seal the deal that the Egyptians became part of Jerusalem and part of the Israelites and therefore the Jews, didn't Solomon marry a bunch of Egyptian women? Solomon married a bunch of Egyptian women. It reiterates the point again. Okay, God is like, just in case you missed it the first time, we're gonna do it again to see if you picked up that hint. Okay, Solomon married a bunch of Egyptian women. I'm assuming that they had children, and then what? He just kicked all those kids out? No, they became part of the tribe of Judah and part of the other tribes. Okay, and another point I'm gonna make up. These guys were so mixed, I can't even. Everybody was so mixed. Okay. Another point I want to make, according to the Amarna letters, the Egyptians were selling people to the tribe of Judah to sell for wives, okay? They were swapping wives, okay? But also the Egyptians were marrying the Hittites, who may or may not have been light-skinned, no one knows for sure. But that would explain why some of these mummies have red hair and light hair, okay? Some of them may have been Hittite descendants who were Indo-European. So that would explain, so even if you say that, so the tribe of Ham and the tribe of Japheth were mixed, okay? They started mixing. Okay, what does genetic tests say about the Egyptians? That is really hilarious. It seems to migrate over time, but basically it's also incredibly mixed. You got literally all kinds of DNA results here. You've got Jew. You got some Spanish DNA in there. You got some Czech in there. Anatolian, French, or Finnish, Greek is it in there? Gregorian. Wow, Syrian. Wow. Oh, I don't even know what English. Italian. Spanish. Okay, wow. Okay, so yeah, everyone was very, 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 very mixed. I'm gonna say this again. I believe everyone. So you trying to attack what people are trying to do? They're trying to attach a current race to these people who were very, very, very mixed. Okay, it's my opinion that these people who came off of Noah's Ark and these ancient people were more mixed than people are now. That is my opinion, and that would make sense. Because these people were more closely related to Adam and Eve were very, 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 very mixed. And so it makes sense that older bones would connect closer to being more mixed than people are now. Okay? Again, with those Christmas lights, you are trying to pull Christmas lights out of a bundle of DNA. Okay? It's just ridiculous. The problem is, if you only look for one race, you're only going to ever find one race. If you only look for Egyptians being black, then you're going to only find Egyptians being black. If you're only going to look for Egyptians being Jew, then you're only going to find Egyptians being Jew. If you're going to only look for Egyptians being light-skinned, then you're only going to find Egyptians being light-skinned. You have to look at all the evidence. The evidence shows that these guys were mixed. They were never just one race. Okay. And it just keeps doing it. God doesn't just bring it up once. He keeps bringing it up. Okay. And then Ruth was a Moabite. Okay. She was a Moabite. And some people say even the Moabites were part Ethiopian. There's some evidence of that. So, but either way, she was not from the tribe, but either way, she was from an enemy tribe, quote unquote. Okay. And she became part of the Israelites. And not to mention, she was Jesus' great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. Okay, and she was a Moabite, who may or may not have been mixed in with Ethiopian. Okay, there's evidence of that. But my point is that it wasn't Semitic. And the Egyptians were mixing up with everyone anyway. Okay, and so do I believe that Jesus had Egyptian blood and Ethiopian blood and everything else, and Hittite blood? Yes. Definitely, yes. There's nothing but evidence to support that. And then I'm going to go into the Hittites again. God reiterates the Hittites again. Okay, didn't David marry Bathsheba, who also gave birth to Solomon? Okay, well, Bathsheba was most likely a Hittite because she was married to Uriah the Hittite. Okay, so that would make Jesus quadruple Hittite and Egyptian and blah 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 and everything else. Okay, you have to read the riddles. Can I tell you what the problem is? People who study the Bible are not paying attention to the female bloodlines. They are only noticing the male bloodlines, and they are not paying attention to the Indo-European female bloodlines. Okay, you're not just supposed to pay attention to the male bloodlines. You're supposed to be paying attention to the female bloodlines, which is really important because it wasn't Mary the female bloodline to the human side of everything. Yeah. All right. And what about David's mighty men? Oh yeah, I forgot about them. David picked up some men wandering in the wilderness who could have been from anywhere, and they joined the Israelite fight and camp. Okay. I'm assuming that these people were just, it doesn't say where they're from. They are out in the wilderness. They could have been Ethiopian warriors. They could have been Egyptian warriors. They could have been Philistine warriors. They could have been Persian warriors. They could have been Babylonian warriors. They could have been Assyrian warriors. They could have been from anywhere. He found them they weren't originally in the Israelite camp. He found them wandering in the wilderness, and they became mighty warriors for God. And not to mention, I'm assuming these men hooked up with Israelite women, and they had children who were definitely mixed. Yes. Okay, now we're gonna bring up Esther and Xerxes. Okay, Esther and Xerxes. There is some evidence that the Persians were mixed in with what we would now call East Indian. Okay, now I can't link that these people were part of the Israelite camp, but they're mentioned in the Bible. Esther married a Persian guy who may or may not have been East Indian, because the Medes and the Persians most likely were part East Indian. They had a child named Darius, who's also in the Bible. Okay, and he was the one that gave the Israelites money later to build the new temple. And I'm not saying that guy was a guy who knew God, but the Persians and the Jews, or the Israelites, were definitely mixed. And Persians just means East Indian, most likely. Okay, anyway, but there's something I really wanted to bring up. Alright, so let's dust off that memory of what happened with Esther, Mordecai, and Xerxes. So, long story short, Esther convinces Xerxes, her new husband, to release the Jews, correct? And that she was a hero, okay? And she had to reveal to Xerxes that her and Mordecai were Jews. Surprise! I have a surprise for you, Xerxes. We're Jews. Me and Mordecai are Jews. And he's like, what? You guys are Jews? I'm obviously paraphrasing. I didn't know that you guys were Jews. Okay, here's the riddle. The Bible's written in riddles. Why didn't Xerxes know that they were Jews just by looking at them? Okay? They had to tell him that they were Jews. By that point, you cannot tell anyone's race by their religion. Okay? They looked like anyone else. They could have looked like anything. They could have looked Semitic, because Semitic doesn't necessarily mean... I'm not saying they didn't look Semitic. I'm saying looking Semitic didn't mean that they were part of God Jews. Okay? Because they were mixed already. Everybody was mixed. Okay? God's people have always been mixed. Okay, we're going to keep going, though. We're going to get into some very hard stuff to swallow. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the Ethiopian. Ethiopian means African, okay? And this is almost kind of confusing too, because most people think the Egyptians were mixed in with Ethiopians. So just saying the Egyptians became part of the Jewish camp is saying the same thing as Ethiopian anyway. There you go with those Christmas lights again. Anyway, so there's a Bible story where Jeremiah, so God's people were falling, okay, and Jeremiah kept trying to warn them, you're falling. And they just kept saying, tell us what we want to hear. We don't want to hear that God's going to punish us and he's going to make us go into Babylon. We want to hear that we can do what we want. And Jeremiah's like, I got to tell you the truth. And they got mad at him. So they put him into a pit. And an Ethiopian guy who was serving in the house of God, he was serving right next to the king. And this Ethiopian guy basically convinced them to let Jeremiah out. But they couldn't do that to him. Alright, here's the Bible passage. Now when Ebed-Melech, the Ethiopian, one of the eunuchs, which was in the king's house, heard that they had put Jeremiah in the dungeon. So, this is just the Bible, and he lets him out. He convinces the king to let him out, okay? The point is, there was an Ethiopian guy who was a Jew. Okay, this was when the tribes already got separated, and it was just the tribe of Judah that was okay for now. He was a part of the tribe of Judah, and he was an Ethiopian. Okay, and then I'm going to talk about something else, because I'm trying to prove to you that the Egyptians were mixed. Okay, and I'm trying to prove to you that God's people were mixed. Okay, it says Ethiopia will be punished. Okay, that is because, why it's bringing up Ethiopia, because there was a part of ancient Egyptian history where the Ethiopians, Africans, ruled over Egypt, okay? And they were fighting with the Jews, okay? And that's why God said he was going to punish them, because these were Ethiopians that were worshiping with the Egyptian gods. So, but at the end of it, he says, but there will become a time when the Ethiopians there will be a present on Mount Zion connected to the Ethiopians. So this is talking about a present on Mount Zion again. In that time shall the present be brought unto the Lord of hosts, and the people scattered, blah, 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 and it says to the Mount of Zion at the bottom. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's saying the Ethiopian people there will be a present on Mount Zion. Okay, this is talking about two different things. This is talking about the present on Mount Zion is talking about this cross on top of Mount Calvary. Because Mount Calvary is Mount Zion, okay? First of all, it's saying Jesus is the present, and he is tied genetically to the Ethiopians, okay? Yes. But also it's saying, when it says the people are underfoot, okay? It's saying that the Ethiopians were at the foot of the cross, okay? In two different ways. All right, I'm going to bring that up in a minute. Okay, now I'm going to get into some very hard stuff to swallow, okay? I'm going to link Jesus to the Greeks and the Romans, okay? And I know people are going to have a hard time with that, but I have to do what God wants me to do. Jesus is linked to every race in the ancient world. All right, I'm going to have to bring up Jezebel, though. Jezebel was obviously a evil woman, all right? But she was a Phoenician. Okay, and she was married to Ahab, the king of Judah, right? All right. So let's talk about the Phoenicians and the Mycenaeans and the Minoans. I'm going to bring them up, okay? So we're going to talk about the invasion of the sea people, okay? I'm going to talk about how all these European people came over to the ancient world, but you have to study it. And this was before the Greeks and the Romans, but you have to study what these names mean, and you have to study the genetics, okay? During the Bronze Age collapse, which is still during when the Bible was being written, okay? It was probably... The Bronze Age collapse happened around the Judges or the Book of Kings, okay? And during the Bronze Age collapse, the invasion of the Sea People came, okay? Who were they? The invasion of the Sea People were a mixture of the Mycenaeans and the Minoans. These people are genetically linked to the Greeks and the Romans. So the Philistines and the Phoenicians are a name of people who settled from the... So the Phoenicians and the Philistines, they settled in the land of Canaan, and they were most likely from the invasion of the Sea People. They were Greeks and Romans before they were called Greeks and Romans, okay? And the DNA definitely connects those two. So there's actually a direct genetic code that connects the Phoenicians with the Romans and the Greeks. Okay, so Ahab married a Greek chick, basically. Okay, so I also wanted to bring up that Goliath was a Philistine. He probably came in on the invasion of the Sea People. All right, he was probably a Mycenaean. He had Mycenaean armor. And the Mycenaean, if you read it, it says that Goliath, his armor was mostly made of polished bronze. And that's what the Mycenaean armor is made of, polished bronze. Okay. Most likely. And he comes from a genealogy that you can trace back to the invasion of Troy. And there was a group of men that were really tall. So lots of people will link him to the Mycenaeans, who just became the Greeks and the Romans. Okay. All right. Okay, but the problem is that the Philistines and the Phoenicians were also mixing in with the original Canaanites. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they were 100% Greek or Roman. They were mixed. Mixed. Okay. So, but the thing is, Jezebel was probably more genetically linked to the Greek and Romans than anyone else. Okay. God's people were commanded to kill Ahab and Jezebel's sons. Okay, there we go with those riddles again. And they did. They killed all of their sons so that icky bloodline would not be continue. Or was it? Because it doesn't say about the female bloodlines, because you're not paying attention to the female bloodlines. The female bloodline was not killed. That is proven because Athaliah was Jezebel's daughter, right? Okay, so these guys were all mixing. These races were already mixed, so mixed I can't even. So Athaliah was Jezebel's daughter, and she was evil too, right? She went crazy and killed all of her grandchildren, except one. All right, and your people know this, but it's not clicking with the female bloodline. Okay, it's not clicking at all. And that was Joash, right? Every preacher in the world is going to say Joash continued the bloodline to Christ. Okay, but listen to where you're missing it. Joash's grandma was Athaliah, and Joash's great-great-grandma was Jezebel. Are you connecting the dots? This little kid who became king and is linked to Christ was part Phoenician, and the Phoenicians are genetically and land-wise related to the Greeks and the Romans. All right. And not to mention, people are going to have a really hard time with this. Jezebel was blood related to Jesus, if you're going to use this. Yes, Jezebel was Jesus' great-great-great-great-grandmother. Just like Bathsheba was Jesus' great-great-great-great-grandmother, and just like Sarah was Jesus' great-great-great-grandmother. Just like Ruth was Jesus' great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. And I'm going to bust it. Okay. Thus said the Lord unto the land of Jerusalem, thy birth and thy nativity is of the land of Canaan. Your mother was a Hittite, your father was an Amorite, and your other mother was a Canaanite. And I know people are going to have a hard time understanding this and taking this in, because it's true though. It's absolutely true. Jews and Christians are descendants, blood-wise, to Jezebel. I know. Everybody's got a little bit of Jezebel in them, and hopefully you accept Christ and that bloodline can be cleaned. Anyway. Okay, so I'm gonna very briefly do China, and then I'm gonna link that to the Native Americans very fast. Okay, real quick. You can link the Hittites to the Chinese. Okay, there are many books written on that. And I wish I could give you the DNA evidence for that, but I can't because there is no DNA evidence for the Hittites. But it is a very wide theory now that some of the first Chinese people are linked to the Hittites, whatever race they were. So the Chinese people, don't you know that your mother was a Hittite? Yes. Okay. All right. And that links us to the Native Americans. Okay, now I am going to bring up genetics. You can genetically link from the DNA evidence from really old Native American remains, and they will be 70% related to China, the Chinese and the Koreans and stuff, and this area. Okay, that is a fact. They came across the Bering Strait. You can argue this happened after Noah's Ark or whatever you want to do, but there's nothing. Archaeology, DNA, and etymology will support this. Okay, that Chinese descended down and they became Native American. So when it says your mother is a Hittite, it's not just talking to the Jews, it's talking to the Chinese and the Koreans, and then therefore the Native Americans. And I also wanted to real quick link etymology into this. In Korea, the people practicing their, I'm gonna say, black magic, okay, is called shamanism. And then what happens? That became a word used in Native American black magic known as shamanism. That is because Native Americans are not 100%, are 70% related to Asians. Alright. So yeah, that's all makes sense. This is why you're going to see similarities with all these ancient cultures, with all these religions and all this stuff. You're going to see similarities because they all come from around the same area and they're all copying each other. And not to mention the oral traditions of the Garden of Eden, in my opinion. That's why everyone is going to have similar stuff. It makes sense. What doesn't make sense is that you're all a bunch of monkeys that rose up out of the air, out of nowhere, and then just started civilization. That doesn't even make sense. Nothing supports that. That is nonsense. You've got to get out of your head that you're a monkey, that your evolution happened, because then you're not going to understand what's happening. Okay, and you're going to get all confused as to why all these people have similar stuff. Alright, you have to listen to God, not listen to nonsense. It's just so funny. Like, for some reason, if this is just coming from evolutionists. For some reason, when everyone stopped being a bunch of monkeys, they just so happened to start civilization right by Noah's Ark landing. Give me a break, man. That's so ridiculous. Even evolutionists say that this information is correct. Alright? Alright. Don't you think that's weird? Anyway, back to the Christmas lights. So people are mixing by land. They're walking across the Bering Strait. But I am going to say that people were mixing by land and by sea, obviously. I'm going to bring up, I call it the second invasion of the sea people, okay? The Europeans invading people by the sea, okay? I obviously think that people were mixing from the other direction as well. Okay, obviously, you can mix people by sea. Obviously, most people know that the Spain invaded, Brazil and stuff like that. And yes, Christopher Columbus stuff was mixed in there. People were coming in from Europe by sea and mixing in with these people too. And it's very important that you have to realize that people were mixing religions, okay? Very important. And I know that what everyone is going to say, the Bible teaches that you're not supposed to mix with the heathens, right? You're not supposed to mix in with the Moabites and with the Canaanites and with the Egyptians. That's because it's not talking about race or land, really. It's talking about mixing gods, okay? And you are not supposed to mix the gods together. The people have always been mixed and they've always been everywhere. The Bible even teaches that some Jews were outside of Israel before the exile. Okay, yes, because it has never been about where you are or about where you're from. It's about who you love, okay, and who you've accepted. When you accept the body and blood of Christ, congratulations, you have become the race of God, okay? Jesus was linked to all these races, and so is everyone else. I'm not even trying to unbundle these Christmas lights. I'm just trying to prove to you that there's a bundle of Christmas lights. Nowhere in the history of the world has anyone ever been one race, including Jesus Christ. That'd be ridiculous. If Jesus was one race, he'd be horrifically inbred. And who wants that? So the Jews in the New Testament, they were fallen, they were left to their own devices, and they started segregating people by race. They were left because there was a 400-year gap between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And in that 400 years, usually when people don't hear from God, they turn to their own devices. And it's my opinion that those current Jews started being very racist. I'm not kidding, okay? Because the Pharisees and stuff like that, they started segregating people by race, which was completely unbiblical in the Old Testament. And they were starting to be sexist. Nowhere in the Old Testament rules does it say women can't serve in the house of God. Obviously, Athaliah became queen. She became queen. Okay, they let her become queen. Yes, she was evil, but obviously back then they were letting women having high-ranking jobs. But for some reason in the New Testament they started getting all racist and sexist, right? Okay, and then God had to remind them, you're supposed to let the Gentiles in too, because it's always been like that. It's always been like that. God's special people are the people who choose God. Okay, you have to choose God to be God's special person. And it has nothing to do with race. And also I wanted to mention that Hebrew, according to history, is a mixture of several different languages, Semitic groups. Okay, so these guys were all speaking different languages. How on earth do you think the Israelites were communicating with the Egyptians? How do you think Moses was talking to the Egyptians? They were bilingual. Okay, they're all bilingual. They were not speaking one race. They weren't just all speaking Hebrew. They were bilingual. The revelation is this. It's always been like this. It should always be like this. Okay, you should never chalk up a race to a god. It should all just be Jesus. Doesn't matter which race you are. The problem is if you think that you're gonna get some special treatment because you are a Jew or you're white or you're black, you're not. Okay, you're gonna rely on your race to save you instead of relying on Jesus. When you accept the body and blood of Jesus Christ, congratulations, that is the race of God, which is everyone anyway. And not to mention, God is talking about the body of Christ, who's always been multiracial and should always be multiracial. You killed your brother when you killed Jesus. It wasn't just talking about the Jews, it was talking about the Greeks and the Romans. It was talking about every single person that was at the crucifixion. Because all those people groups were at the crucifixion. They were all related to Jesus. And that's when it talks about the Ethiopian, it was talking about Mount Zion and being at the foot of Mount Zion presenting a present on Mount Zion. Okay, because it's talking about how all these people groups were at the crucifixion. Alright? They were all killing their brother. Okay? And that's another reason why Jesus and Satan are called bronze colored. Because in the ancient world, okay, I know people like to use this to tack on a race, but the bronze means mirror. Polished, fine bronze means a mirror. It's not describing a race. It's God is trying to tell you that you want to know what race Jesus was, go look in a mirror. You want to know what race Satan is, because Satan is also known as bronze colored. He's known as the bronze serpent, right? You want to know what, that's why Goliath was covered in bronze, okay? See, there's always that connection. Because Satan is every race too. Okay? You want to know what race Satan is? Go look in the mirror. You want to know what race Jesus is? Go look in the mirror. The difference is you've accepted Christ and you're not going to be racist, right? And I'm going to tell you something right now. Okay. Semitic languages go up and down, and Indo-European languages went left to right. And it makes the sign of the cross. A coincidence? No. The flow of Semitic languages went up and down. Okay, and the flow of Indo-European languages started from going left to right, okay, or right to left. That makes the sign of the cross. No, it's not a coincidence. And not only that, in the ancient world, female bloodlines and female authority went left to right. They were horizontal. Female stripes and pillars are represented horizontally. And male bloodlines and male stripes and pillars were vertical, okay? Alright? They were vertical. And that makes the sign of the cross. You're supposed to use the female bloodlines and the male bloodlines. You're supposed to use Semitic stuff and Indo-European stuff to make the sign of the cross, to get the complete picture of what's going on here. And not to mention pillars that go up and down, and a cross make a building, a house, okay? To make a complete house, you have to have all the pillars. You can't just have one. If you have one, the house is going to fall down. You have to have vertical and horizontal pillars to make a house. That is why the Bible is written in a Semitic language, Old Testament, and an Indo-European, European language, Greek, New Testament, okay? Because it's creating a house, and you have to get the complete picture if you want to learn the maximum amount of stuff from the Bible. You gotta start using both sides of your brain, okay? And you gotta stop being racist and assuming that everyone back then was the same race, because that's historically, genetically, and biblically inaccurate. Okay, you gotta stop being racist, saying any one race is more superior than the other, including Semitic people. Everyone has the same rule. You have to accept Christ. Then congratulations, you are in the body blood of Christ. And that is also talking about accepting other people. Okay, this is accepting every other race into the body and blood of Christ. And you know, just like the Egyptians earlier in the video, do you know what people are doing? If you only look for one, you're only going to find one. If you only look for evidence of Jesus being Semitic, you're only going to find evidence of Jesus only being Semitic. If you only look for evidence of Jesus being Ethiopian, you're only going to find evidence that Jesus is Ethiopian. And so on and so on and so on. Most people have racial tunnel vision. And one of the last things that should end all arguments about what race Jesus was, if you actually genuinely believe that God the Father is his real father, and not he wasn't just human, which you have to be saved, you have to believe Jesus was a God, right? He was actually the Son of God to be saved. You can't just think he was a regular human. And every single race was made in the image of God. That would automatically mean that Jesus' direct descendant male bloodline is every race anyway, from God the Father. Alright, so I think that's all. It's a long video, so thanks for watching to the end if you made it. And please think about this stuff. Let it sink in a little bit. And thank you.